All right, everybody. Welcome to a live broadcast. My name is Greg Schwem. I am a corporate stand-up comedian, also the host of the streaming TV series "A Comedian Crashes Your Pad." This again is not a funny interview. Sometimes I do funny interviews with interesting guests, but for those of you who follow me on YouTube or on Facebook, we have a very serious interview and a continuation of an interview that I did last week with my friend and colleague, David Freeman. David is a former coworker from our days at WPTV in West Palm Beach a long time ago, where we were both broadcast journalists. We have since taken different career paths. David is and still is, I might add, a teacher at the Pechursk School in Kyiv, Ukraine. He has been for several years. When the conflict started, I wanted to hear his story. We had an interview about 9 days ago, and at that time, David was in the basement of the school. Dave, I remember you said you felt safe, you had shelter, you had plenty of food, you had plenty of water, you had some students and some faculty that were there, and you said you could probably sustain yourself for at least 2 weeks or so. A lot has changed since that interview was done. So why don't you pick it up now and just tell me what has happened since we last talked?
Well, Greg, as I said, we had plenty of life-sustaining materials. There's no doubt about it. We had plenty of food, plenty of water. We had electricity, stuff to keep the little ones entertained. But as the security situation began to become more and more risky because of the increasing frequency of the rocket attacks, the artillery attacks, and the planes dropping bombs, it became increasingly clear that we weren't going to be able to stay there with children and with families and with some elderly. So on the 4th, we decided to head to the border. And at that point, we weren't sure which border. In fact, it looked like we were going to Hungary. We started heading that direction. Generally, you're just going west, but we ended up actually here in Warsaw, Poland. It was a fairly arduous journey. We were in two school vans, which of course is a luxury a lot of people just don't have. They're in very crowded trains, having to, be shoved together. Some people were standing up for 8, 10, 12 hours at a time, packed in these train cars trying to get out of Kyiv. Our situation wasn't as quite as severe. We had two vans. One car was with us for quite some time, for probably 2/3 of the journey before they peeled off and went somewhere else. So it wasn't as difficult of a trip as many people have had, and that I want to make people understand that clearly, that there have people who have had a much more difficult time of this than we have, but it doesn't make it any less intense. It was a nerve-wracking trip, and with many people in a bus, people get sick, and there's crying babies, and people have pets, and it's not tourism.
Right now. And how much time did you have to actually prepare this from the time you realized that you had to evacuate? You were able to secure vans. Is that something? How easy was something like that? Because again, we're getting back here in this country. Most of the images that we're seeing are people that you mentioned who are traveling on foot. We are hearing about, exhausted families who have been separated, who are making these journeys, and what they encounter. You said yours was not quite that harrowing, but how much time did you have to pull this all together?
We knew on the 3rd that we were going on the 4th.
Okay.
But getting the vans wasn't difficult. There were school vans. I mean, the school has drivers that they either directly own the vans, or that we contract out with somebody who owns that van, but the van is essentially ours for its use. So we had 2 school drivers who were behind the wheel of our vans taking us to the border.
Okay. All right. And were there people that did not want to go with? I mean, and also, did you have to leave people behind?
Yeah, there were when when I left, and I think the situation on school has changed since then. But when I left, there was a family of 4 who decided not to go, and they were currently camped out in our secondary music room. Along with the guitars and the pianos and the drums, they had camped out. Now we believe that they probably moved lower because that's a second floor room. They probably went down to the bottom floor or perhaps into the basement if the population on campus dropped significantly. But I don't know if more people have come back. Now, some of the heartbreaking people who stayed behind were the fathers who sent their children on.
Hmm. And I saw that on your Facebook page. I saw you've been posting some photos, and there was one that was particularly heartbreaking. You had a photo of a 4-year-old girl who seems to have developed a friendship with your wife, I believe, right? And it showed your wife reading to her, and you said that her and her mom were able to make the journey, and the father had to stay behind to fight, correct?
No, he's a guard at our school, and he
Okay.
stayed because of
Oh,
that. But
did
he would not have been allowed to leave anyway because he is of fighting age. Had he tried to go to the border and leave, he would not been allowed to leave.
mhm.
He probably would have been through one of the many checks that we went through, checkpoints along the way. The Ukrainian authorities probably would have taken him off the bus and had him go back or immediately start serving. So there was no point in a man under 60 years old getting on our bus because they weren't going to be allowed to leave.
You mentioned checkpoints. Um, what is it like to go through a checkpoint? How many did you have to go through? What was asked of you? And was there ever a moment of fear that maybe you would be turned away?
No, the Ukrainian authorities were very clear and very supportive in getting us out of harm's way, but they wanted to make sure that the people on those buses were legitimate. So we would have to do a document check, pull out our passports. Sometimes it was just a military member of the force just getting on and looking at us, eyeballing us, and then waving us forward. So,
Hmm.
sometimes the checks were very, very thorough. Sometimes the checks were not, more lenient, but it was never the idea that, oh, you shouldn't be here. It's let's get you through and get you out of here kind of approach.
Right, right. And how long, you may have mentioned this, but how long was the journey totally from Kyiv to where you are now in Warsaw? And did you do it continuously? Did you stop at all?
Oh yeah, we did an overnight in Vinnytsia, a kind of smallish Ukrainian city. We camped or were sheltered in the bottom floor of a building under construction. So that was pretty harsh.
Hmm.
There were essentially no toilet facilities, just kind of a overly used porta potty outside, and for 40 people in the basement of this building. But the kindness showed to us by the people who organized this was incredible. They had food for everybody, and had warm beverages for us in the morning and so forth. Then we got up, and that's when we realized we weren't going to try to get to Hungary, and we were being directed by some people who were coordinating getting a large group like us out of the country, providing us with different routes to take. And then we were directed to go to Lviv, which is essentially the largest city in Western Ukraine, kind of the heart of a radical Ukraine feeling. And we overnighted there again in the bottom floors of a building under construction. This one was a little further along, and there were a number of working toilets and actually a crude shower in the basement. So,
Okay.
and again, lots of food being provided by local organizations. And that's when I mentioned to you that I've seen the best and the worst of humanity in a week.
Yeah, I want to get to that in just a minute. I also want to say if you're watching this on Facebook or on my YouTube channel, both of which I've put up the addresses there and the links, you can ask questions. You can ask questions of David. He's more than willing to take them. You can make a comment, whatever you would like. Okay, that's something we weren't able to do on the last one. If you're watching this on LinkedIn, you might not be watching it on LinkedIn because I'm getting some messages that the LinkedIn broadcast hasn't been working, but we have other outlets, and of course, I will also be putting this up on all my channels afterwards. This interview for those who couldn't watch live, but feel free to ask questions if there's something you're curious about. And now I want to pivot back to what I'm curious about, where you said you have seen the best and the worst of humanity. You've just described the best, or some examples of the best, I think, when you talk about all the nice people who have sheltered you, provided you with sleeping accommodations, food, and so forth. You can talk more about that, or if you want to talk about the worst of humanity, feel free.
Well, I don't have the access to a lot of the images that you have in the West because we've been traveling and we've been busy. But every time I do see, I check my news sources, the horrific images of the suffering caused by a man who is hell bent on expanding his kleptocracy so that he can steal more people from more people as he's stolen from the Russian people, to enlarge his own personal empire. And so, we've seen the face of evil in Vladimir Putin.
Okay. And did you encounter any of that you went from a basement to vans to out of the country. On the way, did you encounter any of that? Did you see either passing anything, either destruction or I almost hate to guess at what you might have seen. I would rather you tell me if there was any atrocities or something that you saw firsthand.
No, Greg, we did not, and I don't want to exaggerate at all.
No, I don't think you are. I don't think there's enough that's been coming out of the country that this is not an exaggeration. But I'm just curious how, what you've encountered.
Well, we were going in the direction absolutely the opposite way of where the hostilities are. The hostilities are north of Kyiv up to Kharkiv, which has been just hammered. And then, of course, it's east and then to the southeast. So generally going straight west is the safest direction. It's also it's going well. One of the things that we did see that was heartwarming was the absolute stream of these big freighters, these lorries coming across from Poland. I mean, they would be 20 of them in a row, just screaming the other direction. And what's in those cargo bins, and hopefully it can make a difference.
I see. Okay. Now, how long do you plan to stay? And this is a very open-ended question because I'm sure you don't have a definitive answer for anything that I might ask you as far as the future. But tell me a little bit about, your accommodations now. You mentioned earlier, how long do you think you plan to stay there? What is your next move? Or is there one?
Well, the hotel that we're staying at, I think I told you, is is basically one step up from a hostel. But I mean, we are comfortable. We have our own room. We have our own shower and toilet, which is a huge relief. And we have this place. It's booked for a month by an organization that if we leave, they'll put somebody else into it. Now, essentially, what in my mind is my plan at this point is to stay long enough here so that I know that this group that came across with us has been connected with the Polish authorities that will support them, that will they get connected. Like we've already got one of our students enrolled at a school. We've got several more going to be enrolled in that school. If I can get people settled and I feel comfortable that they're not real distressed, then I'll try to get my wife to the States.
Okay. Your wife is with you now, though?
Yeah, she is, but she's a Ukrainian and we don't have a US visa. So we're trying to solve that problem.
Okay. All right. I should mention, we also talked a little bit off air before we started. Your school in Ukraine, Pechursk, is still operating virtually, right? Their students are still enrolled. They're still getting lessons. right?
Yeah, they are. I won't be delivering lessons for a few days because I'm thoroughly occupied here with this group. But and
Mhm.
shout out to Alexander Best, a coworker of mine. He teaches parallel courses with me, and so he's picked up my kids, and great. Um, but yeah, we're offering courses online, and but that is something we're used to doing over the last 2 years of COVID. I mean, teaching online, it's not ideal, but we know how to do it. And so
Right.
that's what we're doing right now is keeping kids engaged. We
Mhm.
also are affiliated with some other organizations that have shown extreme flexibility for us. The International Baccalaureate, we offer their diploma program to our students in grades 11 and 12, and they've been very helpful and cooperative in making accommodations for our kids who are just trying to finish high school and get on to university. So
Mhm.
school is still continuing to operate. It will be a very long time before there's any kind of idea of having school on campus, but it's certainly, we haven't given up on that idea by any stretch of the imagination.
Right. The words you mentioned in your previous the previous question I asked you about you are in this hotel, and you said when you leave they will replace you with somebody else. Is there what we're hearing now? The words that and the phrases that we probably weren't hearing 9 days ago when you and I talked are refugee crisis, humanitarian crisis, stories about hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians that want to come over the border, and Poland being one of the countries that is accepting them. But at some point, is there talk of we can't handle anymore?
Well, isn't that essentially the war on Europe? I mean, that is what Putin has done. Is he is
Yeah.
hammering Western Europe with, well, Central Europe with a refugee crisis, and that's a war.
Mhm.
So you can call it what you want, but a refugee crisis that is instigated by an aggressor war is a war on the country that's having to receive those refugees. So what I understand, and the director of the school that's providing so much support for us, he is saying that, we're accommodating these kind of situations now, but we expect this to get a lot bigger. We've got more facilities we'll be turning into, sleeping areas for people and so forth. So,
Mhm.
people here expect a lot more. And Poles, they are really stepping up.
It sounds like it from everything I have read and all the images that I have seen. We also should mention I asked you in our previous conversation 9 days ago where you get your news from. You mentioned BBC and Al Jazeera were your two primary sources of information. Over here, we tend to gravitate towards maybe to either CNN or to Fox News or to MSNBC. I would say that those are probably the primary three, other than maybe network news, but as far as that are on 24/7. Now let's kind of pivot a little bit into politics and into how this war is being perceived, because I think it might be a little bit different than it was 9 days ago. And I'm a little curious. I think over here, we have imposed economic sanctions, not as stringent as some would like. Some are saying, when are we going to cut off Russian oil? And like that's which we have not done yet. We also have obviously NATO has been given the green light to by countries to send planes. Any country can send planes over to you, but I think an awful lot in this country that is once we start equipping Ukraine's with military supplies, vehicles, that kind of thing. Now we are basically saying we are joining the war. And I feel like, in a way, it's sort of a chicken versus the egg type of a thing. I know Vladimir Putin, how far will he push us before we say, okay, we can't do anything else? And I think that's going on. I don't know if you agree um, with that hypothesis, but what is your feeling about that? And how do also Ukrainians feel about what they're seeing in this country? I'm sorry to ask a question on top of a question, but your president Zelensky is basically saying the news that came out yesterday was him saying, we need more. You have to step up more than you've already done.
Well, I don't have a pulse on what the average Ukrainian is thinking right now. One, I'm not Ukrainian, don't speak the language, and two, I've been busy the last 4 days going the opposite direction. But what I hear, and I've repeated to you, is that the war between the Russian Federation and NATO is underway. It has started. Russia has a head start. And eventually NATO will have to engage. And it depends on, do you do it now or do you wait? And I think the idea is somehow waiting is a better approach. But, I would say, well, okay, more Ukrainians die while you wait to make that decision, the decision that you will eventually make, because something's going to happen to spill over into Poland somehow, some way. Poland gets engaged and then NATO's engaged. So, I just think it's a matter of time. And I hope there's some really good strategic thinking going on the part of U.S. military on how to win this and win this quickly, because, no one wants a long, bloody war in Europe. Certainly I don't, but I think it's started.
Yeah. Okay. And the resolve of the Ukrainian people, has that changed at all? You mentioned in our last conversation about how determined they were, and they are in this, and they really think they can prevail. Has anything changed? Even you said you can't speak for the Ukrainian people, but yet you're traveling with some. And what do you talk about at night?
Well, there is everybody that I was traveling with still is in contact with somebody who was left behind, somebody who's still in a village or a town or in one of the big cities. And my wife has friends who are still manning checkpoints in downtown Kyiv, people
which is becoming a very hot spot now, right? I mean,
yeah.
It started kind of on the perimeter, and yet what we're hearing is it's moving closer and closer, the conflict, into the downtown area, correct?
I haven't been watching and following news coverage as probably as closely as you guys have, because we've been, occupying ourselves with other things. But, there are still people who are staying in the fight. We've got one of my colleagues, a Russian teacher. She is decided to stay working on helping to make uniforms and provide material support for people who are actually still fighting in the city. So people are not running away, from what I can tell. But they're going to try to hold their capital as long as they possibly can. But a lot of people think that, well, if Kyiv falls, the war is over. And my response to that is no. I mean, that's you take a city, it doesn't mean that you have won the war. There is still a vast amount of Ukraine to the west that is completely unoccupied. And, the resources
which is the direction you went, right? You mentioned that that's the direction that you headed, and without any issues.
Yeah, I mean, it's still unoccupied Ukraine. And so therefore you can, a lot of weaponry, a lot of soldiers, a lot of volunteers can come across the border and engage. So, I know that it's seen as pivotal that the capital is held, and I certainly hope it is. But if Kyiv falls, it doesn't mean that the war is over.
Okay. Are you surprised that, in a pleasant sense, that it hasn't fallen yet?
Well, I think, it's surprised to somewhat, but extent, but certainly I think the Russians are even more surprised. The fact is they, all the crap that they tried to promote, that, the Ukrainian military is ineffective, it'll roll over, they'll surrender, they don't want to fight us, they want our leadership anyway in the world. Everybody knows that was a bunch of crap. But what people really found out, that the Ukrainian military is really punching back very, very hard.
Okay. Tell me what you think, and again, if you don't have to answer this question, but Vladimir Putin's biggest strength and his biggest weakness at this point.
I think his biggest strength and his biggest weakness is his inner circle. At what point
Mhm.
will these extremely wealthy people who have organized themselves into this, this essentially, like I said, I like to use kleptocracy as the way that the Russian government is, and these people at the top who have stolen for so long, but now that you really start to hammer them hard economically, they'll start looking at each other and going, why are we having to suffer for this man's ambitions? Because these oligarchs are going to be made poor, and either
Mhm.
poor or dead, either one I'm fine with. Um, as long as we get that accomplished, I think that's where his greatest weakness is, because his people can try to rise up against him, but they'll just be gunned down in the street. I mean, that's kind of Russian 101. You people
Mhm.
up raise a fuss, you kill them. So hopefully one of the inner circle will decide that enough's enough, and they'll pay somebody enough money to solve that problem. But I'm not holding out for that.
Right, which I think is still what we're thinking is going to work over here with the economic sanctions. You squeeze them for their money, and eventually, the we ruin the economy, and that will be the end of it. And like you said, that remains to be seen, obviously. So we're still obviously in kind of a wait and see game. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's the people though who really get hurt the worst, of course, are going to be the average Russian person. I mean, they're going to get
Yes.
squeezed the hardest, and that's unfortunate. But that's part of Russian history.
Your president Zelensky has almost obtained. He has been. He's almost. He has Elvis like status all of a sudden over here, because I think in general, because and a lot of that I think is social media driven, just because of you have someone who became president with no political experience, was an actor, was a comedian, and I certainly could not run a country. So my hat's off to him. We're both comedians, but I never would think I could run a country. Do you still feel that he deserves the accolades that he is getting from around the world?
Yeah, because he's standing up to a bully.
Hmm. Hmm. There you go,
And
right there.
yeah, it's pretty much it.
Okay, all right,
Standing up to a bully.
yeah. Let's talk a little bit about. I know if you'd like to give a shout out to maybe some of the organizations where people can donate. I maybe you don't have them off the top of your head. One thing that is getting a lot of press over here is that a lot of people are renting Airbnbs in Ukraine and not staying there. They have no intention of. They're just paying for people who have Airbnbs as their way of donating and trying to help the Ukrainian people. So they're reserving Airbnbs that are in the Ukraine, and yet they're like, but we're never going to show up, and please take the money. That's kind of a creative way, and I'm sure there's better ways to donate. But I mean, tell me about some of the organizations that you've come across that maybe people watching this could donate to, can support, can learn more about.
Probably one of the fastest ways is to, see if they can connect into the Ukrainian communities in the cities in which they live. There's a big one, I do believe, in Chicago. There's large Ukrainian communities, certainly in
There is.
Canada, I'm aware of,
Mm-hmm.
and find out how that money can go to, groups that are trying to get people out. I will do my best to come up with some locations for people can help. And I know people are desperate to do it. I had several comments from me. It says, before you talk to Greg tonight, make sure you've got some stuff because people want to know. And, I did spend some time getting some messages out, where can I have people send their money? And I promise to do that in the next day or so, is get that information available for people. What I'm trying to do is track individual families that I know of, where the kids who may have departed a couple days earlier than we did, where are these families? How can we get some money to them? So, what I may do is also just provide some kind of opportunity for people to connect one-on-one families and say, how do I get money in their pocket? Because, that's important. One of the things that I ran into today, though, was I couldn't change my Ukrainian currency here at a local kiosk. I don't know I can't blame a local kiosk for not wanting to take Ukrainian currency, but I'll go to a bank and find out what I can do on that. But the money that really talks and works is going to be either a euro or a dollar. Those are what will be able to go the distance.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now that you're safe and settled and so forth, can you just kind of walk me through a typical day? Maybe you haven't had a typical day, maybe you haven't been there long enough, but do you feel like you and your wife can now just go out for some fresh air? Is there, or is all your time spent, as you said, taking care of the people that you were charged, whether it's students, whether it's other faculty members? You seem to have taken on kind of a big brother type of an approach, basically, from what you've said. I mean, is your day spent making sure that everybody else is safe and comfortable and not scared? I mean, what are you doing?
Well, no, I mean, we were on the road all yesterday, and
Mm-hmm.
last night I think we got to got checked in maybe 8 or 9 o'clock. We got a first real night's sleep in a long, long time.
Mm-hmm.
And then actually had a normal, late breakfast, and then we were picked up by the wife of a military contractor who's here currently, and she took us around to do some errands. We're out of clothes. We had one change of clothes on us, and so we went clothes shopping, and so we went to a
Mm-hmm.
mall, which was kind of a weird experience because to walk around and see people doing normal things, just
Mall
shopping.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, shopping.
Shopping. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, that hasn't been part of our reality for at least a couple of weeks. And so
Uh-huh.
it was kind of an unusual experience, but a very welcome one. And
Good.
then we went and stuff like trying to get a Metro pass for the subway system here because chances are we'll be here for a month. So I'm going to try to make that work.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so
You
that's
said you
we're
said you'll
gonna.
be here for a month.
I
You,
think so. Tomorrow is we're having a meeting where we're trying to get all of our folks who came in with us on this trip, and also supplying the link to any other Ukrainian families who are connected to a school who left earlier, who are in other, like down in Krakow, to join in and make sure that our human relations department at school is going to make sure that they're connected with the Polish government authorities to make sure that we get all of our people connected and into the system so that they get registered, they get the support they need. So that's something that our human relations department will be doing tomorrow, holding a Zoom for people who will be at the campus where we are, and then also at other locations in Poland, so that we can get additional support to them. You asked me earlier if I had a shout out. I have a huge shout out to the American School of Warsaw. They have been
mhm.
phenomenal, absolutely
Okay.
phenomenal people, getting us situated, helping with logistics, getting across the border, got the bus lined up for us to pick us up on the other side, had food waiting for us. And once we then got to school, there was also food. They had, everything down to child car seats ready to go for, their people who would be taking us to their homes. If they didn't have a car seat, school already had a car seat for them. I mean, it was that level of
Mhm.
organization that these people have shown.
That's amazing. That's unbelievable. I'm going to put right now up. I'm going to put the website of the American School of Warsaw up right here. So let's take a look. So if you want to, if anybody's watching and wants to go to that website and find out a little bit more about what they're doing, if there's a way you can donate to them, anything like that, there's the website right up there. All right, David, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I would like to ask you one more. Well, there's two more questions, because I started to ask this when you said you would be here for a month. To me, that implies that you think you will eventually be going back to where you live in Kyiv. Is that a true statement?
Well, if it were safe and under Ukrainian control, I would go tomorrow.
Hmm. Okay. Do you think that will ever happen?
Yes.
You do. Okay.
Sooner or
All
later,
right.
it will simply be too hard and too costly for the invaders to permanently occupy Ukraine. They can't do it. They don't have the numbers, and the more soldiers they tie up here who get killed and go home in body bags, the more and more resistance there will be growing, let alone from the populace, but from the people who are making money. So yeah, eventually it will end up back in Ukrainian hands, and I think
Mhm.
it will be the end of Vladimir Putin.
Okay. All right. And I think there's an awful lot of people around the world who hope that you're correct on that. Let me end with one more question. Do you have just a particular story that you can share, something that you saw? Let's make it a good one. We talked, we've sort of spoken in generalities before about you've seen the best and the worst and so forth. Is there one? I mean, I loved that picture that we referred to earlier of the 4-year-old girl and getting the book read to her by your wife. At least I think your wife was reading the book. Maybe it was the other way around. I don't know. But we always hear about the children. You just said that one of the first things you were going to do is make sure that the school was up and running and that the kids that you brought were registered with school so they could continue an education, and the Pechursk school where you teach is still online, and you hear so much about how this is affecting children. Is there something that you might be able to share, or something that you say to kids that you're either with or from around the world that need an understanding of this conflict?
I really don't have some kind of story or antidote that I've experienced, but in the totality of it is, there it seems like every generation has its proving point, and this is our proving point. And I hope we're worthy of past generations in carrying forward with the torch of freedom.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, and that's however that can be explained. I think obviously that has to be explained differently depending on the age of who you're talking to. But certainly, I think around the world, what you said, people agree with that in one form or another. Obviously, you're going to have different ideals and ideologies and so forth. But I think the world is. Would you say it's safe to say that the world is with you? Do you feel that way?
Oh yeah, I mean, I've had people comment that they've never seen the West so galvanized in its approach to this. You have to go back to the Second World War to find
Mhm.
this kind of level of commitment on the part of people to stand for what is right. But people will.
And to think about somebody other than themselves at some point too, which I think is something that we struggle with
Oh
now.
yeah,
It's not taking place where I live, so why should I be concerned about it?
yeah, actually, Greg, I'm wearing a T-shirt that was given to me by the American School of Warsaw, and what it says on it is, I'll read the one they gave to my wife. It says on it, um, "Belong to something bigger than yourself." I'll
Belong
hold
to
that.
something bigger than yourself. Uh,
Belong to something bigger than yourself.
I love it. I
Yeah,
love it, and that is a
all right,
great way to, I think, to end our interview.
you bet.
I'm sure you have nothing going on at this point. It certainly didn't sound like it, and I would like to say that we have been trying to set something up, but after we talked 9 days ago, I said I definitely want to do a follow up, and you were all in favor of doing that. And then, of course, we've been trying to set something up for about the past 3 days, which have been just filled on your end with just the fact that you're able to sit down and chat with me and keep people up to date and bring a perspective of somebody who's not a news person. I thank you so much for what you're doing. It's fascinating, and I wish you the best. And I hope that you're safe. I hope that your family, that your wife is safe, and all the children and the faculty members that are traveling with you are also safe. And let's stay in touch, okay? If you want to do another one, I mean, the situation is changing, but as long as you feel safe and willing to come on and talk to people, I'm willing to I'm willing to listen. Okay.
Okay. I look forward
All
to
right.
doing this again, Greg. All right.
All right. Thanks a lot. All right. Take care. We'll see you.
All right. See you. Bye.
And that is David Freeman. So you can find David Freeman on Facebook. If you want to follow him, and you can hear some of those questions that, or see some of those images, and some of his thoughts about what's going on. Just David Freeman on Facebook. There's probably a lot of David Freemans, but eventually you will find him. Again, David teaches at the Pechursk School, Ukraine. If you want to Google that and find out what their situation is, we mentioned the American School of Warsaw. I hope I've done my part. It's something that obviously everybody, the world needs to know about and needs to continue to know about. It's not something that we can just shut out and say, okay, well, that's taken place for 2 weeks now, and I need to move on with my lives, because this really is a problem that is affecting a situation that is affecting the entire world. So thank you, everybody, for joining me. And again, if you want to shoot me any kind of a message, you can always go to my Facebook page, or let's see, I will put that up real quick. Let's see, here we go. So that's my YouTube channel, where I post episodes of me staying in Airbnbs around the country, around the world. And you can also go to my Facebook page right there, and I'd be more than happy to answer questions. So thank you again to Dave. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And for those people who had to leave, I will be posting this on my social media channels in its entirety. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you to StreamYard for hosting us on this platform.